Are you interested in getting perfectly made filter coffee at home, but you have no idea how? Well, the Xbloom Studio might be the solution to your problem. But is it actually worth it? After all, it is a pod machine, and that sounds cheap and nasty, but who should buy this, and should they buy this? Well, I've been perfecting a pod recipe for a few weeks now, and I might have the answers to all your questions. So let's check it out. The Xbloom Studio is the second release from Xbloom in just about 6 months. And it's not really an upgrade over the Xbloom original, it's more of a cross-grade. In fact, some of the materials are actually a downgrade, but overall, the price is also massively reduced. So I think a lot of people are going to find some very special things about this, as well as there's new features that really sets it apart from the original, and I'll go into those in a second. Now, before I go further, full transparency, I was sent this unit free of charge from Xbloom in exchange for doing this review. However, my thoughts are my own, and I have not been swayed by anything, and I'm not getting paid. This is not a sponsored video. I'll try to do my best to really highlight the things that I love about it, as well as the things that are small gripes that I might have about it as well. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, there is a brains trust behind this. 3 of the greatest legends in the coffee world. There's, of course, the legendary roaster Scott Rayo, who's really big on filter coffee and roasting, and so I'm loving that he's behind this. There's Brian Kwan, who's another legendary YouTuber as well, really great behind this machine and does a lot of experiments. And then, of course, there's the legendary 2-time world championship latte artist Lance Hedrick, fellow YouTuber. In fact, he's done a deep dive into this, explaining all of his input he's had on the advisory board of this machine. So if you're watching this, Lance, I hope you have a bit of feedback for me. You can tell me whether I've done a great job or whether I need to do better. Let me know in the comments below. So I mentioned this is a pod machine, and a lot of people will immediately reject it, going, pods are bad, pods taste horrible, they're bad for the environment, all of that. But this is a different type of pod machine. For one, you can hear here, it's filled with beans. So that makes it 1,000 times fresher than any pre-ground pod machine. And not only that, the pods are made with sugarcane and mulch, and so they are recyclable, biodegradable, so they're not your plastic, once-off, landfill waste type of pod. These really are looking after a little bit more of the environment than your usual pods. But even if you resist the pods altogether, it actually comes with an Omni dripper, which allows you to use your own beans and pop them in there and dial in your perfect recipe based on the freshest local roaster that you might have access to. So why isn't this an upgrade to the original Xbloom? And should you be really annoyed if you paid full price for the Xbloom original moments before they released this new version? Well, I don't think you do. Yes, there's some things that set it apart, but the Xbloom original is made with stainless steel casing, and unlike this one, which is made with food-grade plastic, the original Xbloom sets itself apart. Even though some of the features are missing on it, it's still a beautiful machine. I think it's fantastic quality, and this is designed in a way to bring the price down a lot, because there was a bit of resistance considering that the original was about $700 US or $1,500 here in Australia. So they've really gone back to the market, listened to their audience and said, okay, we need to reduce the price down. That's the number one thing. How can we do that? And whilst they've done that, they have introduced a few more features, which I'll go into in a second. Right now, there's no price for this in Australia, but I'm thinking it'll be about $1,000 Australia. It shouldn't be any more than that, which is $499 in the US. And that's a reasonable price for what is essentially a pod machine, but what I consider to be more of a completely automated pour-over filter machine. The finish itself, even on the plastic, is still nice. It's a matte white finish, and it comes in 2 colors, a black as well. This part here is an opaque glass, which I absolutely love, and because you can see all the different designs coming through, all of the little icons that pop up. Right now, there's a heart showing it's on standby. When you press it, you can see here all the icons that show different parts and sections of the machine. And then when it's done, it comes up with a little finished coffee, really nicely telling you that it's ready. So integrated beautifully, the icons, the information that you need to see, and these buttons are just gorgeous. I think they are really tactile. You can feel them, but they don't feel cheap at all. Now, maybe wear and tear over long term, then this machine might break down. I'm not sure. It's very new. Yeah, and that isn't my concern right now anyway. So while it might seem like an expensive brewer for $500 US, they've separated out the grinder part here, the kettle and pour over part here, and then an integrated scale as well. So if you were to add these up and buy them separately, you're looking at around $300 US anyway. So you're paying for that privilege of something that's completely integrated, usable and automated with your phone, and completely feature-packed with all these unique features where anyone can explore coffee or just make a coffee really easily. There's so many good things just from looking at it and feeling around it. There's this little slidey thing here. It's great. The little flippy part here for the water reservoir. As I mentioned, the knobs. Watching this arm go back and forth to collect the coffee grinds and go back to pour over is so nice. I think I'm one of those people that just gets in love with the simple things. So that sort of feature really excites me. Just watching it, the whole experience, making coffee, not doing anything and getting a really good result really excites me. I love all the cutesy little icons here when it tells you that it's grinding, when it tells you that it's pouring, when it tells you that it's weighing, doing all of those things. And of course, at the end, telling you that your coffee's ready. It's just gorgeous. And I never get tired of watching it. I'm a simple man. Now, for those of you watching this for its main function, which is the automated pour over, I want to show you how easy it is because it's so simple. When you purchase this machine from the website, you can also purchase a myriad of different pods, and they come in these packets like this. So they're all sealed in there nice and tight. And they come with this, what is called an NFC card. And on there, from each roastery, is the roast type, the origin, the varietal, the processing method, elevation, and the flavor notes. And what you have to do is very simply grab the pods. I'm using this one here from Onyx Lab. It's a mixed varietal from Ethiopia. And all I need to do is take this NFC part here, wipe it. Whoop, don't lose these. Wipe it over the top till you get it in the right spot. There we go. Now the recipe is set in there. So a grind size of 69, a weight of 16 grams. And all I need to do is peel that off, slide this little beautiful slidey thing here, pop the beans in. Then that just sits in a little cradle here. And I grab my little dripper and I press play. And now, yeah, it's going to get stuck. That isn't supposed to happen. All right, what the heck happened there? Must have holes in it. Okay, that is a first. So it looks like a manufacturing issue, not anything related to the machine. But Onyx Lab forgot to put in a little filter paper. Normally it looks like this. I don't know if you can see, but you can see there's a like white filter paper there. They just forgot to put that in. And that is why it caused a mess. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to clean up and we'll try it again. So all you need to do, pop the beans in the top, put this in a little cradle. Now, my decanter is a little bit too big. It doesn't fit under there. So I'm just going to take the tray off and then I can fit it underneath and that'll work well. So reignite the recipe. Come on. There we go. Simply press play and enjoy. And the little grinding icon here. So here we go. Beautiful spiral. And look at that lovely little icon telling me that the coffee is ready. So super satisfying. And I didn't have to do anything. And now I get to enjoy this delicious coffee. And I want to ask you guys a question who are watching this. Did this satisfy your craving for an automated pour over? Because I really think there's many situations where this could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people who have different coffee preferences with not really a huge understanding of coffee, but even households, offices, workplaces, anywhere where you might have multiple people with different coffee preferences and they want to try and make coffee themselves, but they don't really know how to do it. This could solve it. So did that satisfy you? Or are you the person that would prefer to manually hand grind your coffee, then stir and pour, do your own filters and make your coffee that way? Or is this something that you would be interested in? Let me know in the comments below. Yeah, that is just delicious. The downside here in Australia is that we don't have many roasters on board with this. So we're actually beholden to getting them from America, and they get here and they're a little bit older This is still lovely, but it is tasting a little bit fatigued because it's been sitting in travel for such a long time. So it's not as fresh as if I went down to my local roastery, or if I got my own beans, which I have, and then I used my own recipes in the machine, which I'll go into in just a sec. However, there is a company here that is working on distributing these machines, and they're called Coffee Tools Distributing. And they're working on a website to reach out to local roasters like myself to be able to design a recipe and a card and pod and package so that people in Australia can get access to really fresh Australian roasted coffees. Because in Australia, we do roast differently. In America, they like to roast a little bit darker than what we do here in Australia. So Australians really would love access to our Australian roasters when it comes to filter coffees. So as I mentioned before, I have my own company that ships coffees all around the world, really delicious, high-grade quality coffees. And I'm going to show you how to make this Yoga Chef coffee in the recipe that I've devised over the last couple of weeks. But of course, if you're interested in coffee and you're around the side of the globe, then jump on the website, coffeebeansdelivered.com.au. You can see the whole range there. Sometimes shipping can seem a little bit expensive, but if you convert the US dollars to Australian dollars, you're saving yourself about 30% savings there. And if you say you're from YouTube, in your notes, I will actually add in some extra coffees for you to give you a little bonus. And if you buy a couple of kilos, then that $30 shipping doesn't add up to much, and it's good value to get such great quality Australian roasted coffees. So that's one way you can support me and help me make more of these videos. Otherwise, just give me a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate everything. I'm doing this for you guys. Thank you for watching this so far. That being said, let's get into some of the features on the grinders and the kettle. So the grinder itself is a 48mm conical burr grinder, not too dissimilar to the Lagom Minis. It's a great grinder. Not only does it just grind nicely and it's quite a large burr size, it does a really good grind. It also has an ionizer and a sweeper to help ensure that you get the maximum or the least amount of retention in your coffee grind so that all the coffee that you put in there ends up back in your filter. It also has 80 steps, which is quite huge. And if you look on the top of the reservoir, you can see here, it tells you a guide on the size of grind that you need for each type of brewer. So if you're using this, you're going to look in that pour over area between 30 and 70. So there's 40 steps there to choose from. Espresso only has about 15, but you're not often using this for an espresso grinder anyway. And then you have AeroPress and cold brew, French press, things like that as well. So the guide's up there. Just gives you a lot to play with. Not only that, it has a variable RPM. So you can actually set the different RPM levels depending on what your preference is. Now, that's a little bit gimmicky, I must admit, because RPM hasn't really had enough time to develop data to say what speed the grinder should go at to get the best flavors. But it gives you an option from 60 to 120 RPM, and that's something to play around with. I have found that the medium ranges around that 100 mark kind of give you the sweetest flavors, but that's just my preference, and I'd love to hear what you guys have discovered, who anyone else has been using this machine. Let me know in the comments below, because that's something that's not really established yet. Now, the Precision Kettle is absolutely amazing, because not only does it allow you to adjust most of the variables, like your temperature, your flow rate, you can adjust the volume, obviously, you can set your ratios in there, but you can also do that at every stage of the pour. So you can do your bloom at a certain flow rate and a certain temperature, and then you can also set it for each one of those pours. So if you did a 5-step pour or a 3-step pour, you can adjust those variables all the way through it. And not only that, but underneath here, you can see a little noodle finger that spins around and acts like a barista would be pouring a gooseneck kettle. You can do spiral, you can do circular, or you can just go straight in the center. And this little arm here can agitate the coffee, just to give it that little bit of mixing, help dissolve all of those oils into your coffee and get them into your cup. Now, the agitation isn't huge, and sometimes I think, is it actually doing anything? Because it's not violent enough to get all those grinds loose, but maybe it's actually adding a lot. I haven't had a lot of time to focus in on each particular agitation, but you can do that before, after, any step along that pour. Now, the scales are straightforward. They can go down to 0.1 of a gram, so very precise, and it's great for dialing in. You also get this dosing cup, so if you want to, you can put your coffee in there, put it up underneath here and grind straight into there, then take it out and it fits on your portafilter if you wanted to use it elsewhere. Dialing in your own coffee is amazing, and I want to take this time to really focus on the app, because the app is actually where all the power is. If you want to make your own coffee, and as I said, we're using the Yoga Chef here. So I've dosed out my lovely beans here. I pop them in the top. And I've been working on a recipe that sort of fits. They come with the Omni dripper here, so you've got your paper here. You can't add any water to it straight off the bat, so you do have to water it elsewhere, put it in, or just sacrifice not wetting the paper. However, wetting the paper isn't super hard. As you can see here, you can use this kettle to do that as well, but just remember, you want to make sure that you take the water out before you run your pour. One of the downsides to this is that you can't do any of the variables or settings on the machine itself. You need to use the app. So it connects pretty much straight away, and it brings up all of your brewing and your previous recipes that you've imported. You can just go in to create your own recipe, and here you've got a myriad of options. So if you really want to dive into getting the perfect recipe and you want to play around with all the things, here's where you do it. You can set your grind size here really nicely. You can set your water ratio. I've set it to a 59 grind size, and then the ratio I like to use is 1 to 16.6. So 15 grams in, 250 out. Then you can also put in whether you want to bypass or not. So if you want to add extra water to dilute your concentration, then it actually, the arm moves out the way, drops water into your cup, and then moves the arm back in to continue pouring. Here's where you add all your steps. You can add in as many steps as you like, I believe, and you can play around with all different variables. So your volume, so you might want to do a 50 ml pour, then have the temperature set to 95 degrees, have a flow rate of 3.2, say, and then I want to pause for 20 seconds afterwards, just so that it gives it time to settle. You can then set your spiral, centered, or circular, and then you can have agitation on and off at each stage. So you can have it agitate after your first pour, before your second pour, after your third pour, and you just keep saving that. The one gripe I have with this is that if you don't get the sliders exactly right, you have to, if you've set it to 250 ml, you have to add all your steps up to exactly match 250 ml. You can't go 251, it won't let you. If you go 249, it won't let you. And sometimes when you're using these sliders, my big fat fingers can't get that exact precise level, and then I'm sitting there for 15 minutes trying to get that 1 ml exactly right before it lets me set the recipe and go. Small detail, but it would be nice to just say, all right, if it's 251 mils, I'm going to live with that. Once you're set, you can then save it, so you can go straight into it from the front. Also, you can use the card, and if your phone has a NFC reader and it's on, you can actually import it straight into your phone and save it there. So it's really intuitive. I love that design. So now I've got my Yoga Chef. I'm going to pour in my beautiful Yoga Chef coffee, and I've saved it. I never have to think about that again unless I want to adjust anything on the machine as well. Now, my grievances. And I have to preface this before that my grievances are very small in comparison to how great this machine is. So please take that into consideration, but I would be remiss not to talk about them. Firstly, there's the water reservoir. It's tiny. In fact, you're probably going to get about 3 cups of coffee. If each one is 250 ml, it's not much larger than a 700 ml reservoir. That's a bit annoying because you're just going to have to keep filling it up. So keep some water spare on the side to fill it up when you need. The other alternative, they have addressed this issue, and you can get a little hose, pop it in the back, feed it into a drum of water and use your water that way. Or if you have a filter and a way to measure the pressure, you can tap it straight into your mains. So it's not the end of the world, but it is one of those things where I guess for space savings, they made a smaller reservoir. It's just that it really would be nice to have a little bit more, or maybe just to make it super easy, it comes with the tube that you can just go straight into a water bottle and use it from there. Now, the ability to use your own coffee and use your own filter papers, you can even, with the Cradle, put in your own V60 and do a pour over, or even an AeroPress if you wish. My only problem here is that the distance between the bottom of the Cradle and the top of the tray is about 10 centimeters. And like this little decanter, they sit at 11 centimeters. So it means by the time you put that in, you don't have any space. So as you saw before, I had to take the drip tray off to put it underneath, still use the scales, but it gives it just enough headroom. Or you have to go and search for a one that's less than 10 centimeters. And it would have been nicer to have just a bit more headroom here so that you could use any standard decanter. Speaking of the drip tray, it's nice, it's lovely, it's well made, except that this little part on the top, really hard to get off. Is to clean it out, you need some like nice fingernails to get in there. So that's just a little tiny problem I have, but nothing major. But yeah, just something to note. Obviously, if you want to keep it nice and clean. Now, one time I was running it and it did sort of pop out somehow in the middle of a pour. I'm not sure quite what happened, but it didn't let me do anything to get out of it or to reset it, to cancel it. It just came up with the information here, and the only option I had was to play out the rest of it, but it wouldn't do anything. I couldn't hold the buttons to override it. I couldn't do anything. I ended up, looked in the manual to see if there was an override, ended up having to turn it off and restart it again. But that only happened the once, and I haven't had any other issues with it since then. The NFCs are amazing technology, and I love that you just need to wave it over there to get that recipe set. However, it is risky. If you lose this, you cannot do anything about it. So you have to be really careful that you've at least imported it into your app, or that you keep on holding onto this NFC. However, I've heard that they've brought out a QR code system, which would make it easy, because it doesn't matter if you lose it then. You could just go to the website, scan your phone, grab the recipe and put it back into the machine. And that brings me to the last little grievance, which is I wish there was a way. I'm a tactile person and I'd love to be able to set my recipes on the machine itself. So to be able to click through here, quickly dial it in and then press play, rather than having to go into the app to do it all and set it up in the first place. It's a first world problem, I get that, but it would be lovely. Maybe it's only a firmware update that they can bring out in the future. I'd love to be able to access some of the menu in here to just be able to set and store my recipe cards directly into the machine itself. So who should buy this machine? Well, I think there's so many opportunities here that this machine could really fit into. Obviously, we talked about the person just getting into filter coffee with no understanding and wanting to sort of learn on the fly over time. This is perfect for that. I also think there's a spot in the office because you have multiple people. Everyone can have their own coffees, have their own pods, and all they need to do is walk up, pop in the beans, press the button, and just make their coffee. And they can sit down, and every 5 minutes they can come back and grab their coffee. Super simple. And for those people in the office who are a little bit more into their coffee and want to play around with it, the option is there for them too. And I also think that there is a spot for this in a cafe like mine, because we don't have a dedicated barista to be able to do the pour overs and V60s. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to set all of that up to make it for one person. And there's not enough money that you can charge to get that back. Now, you can go out and buy a Marco, which is a pour-over function built into your bench, but they cost $10,000. There is a place where this could be sitting on the back bench, and if someone wanted a filter brew, they could have it there, and 5 minutes later, without anyone touching it, they've got their coffee. That would be much more cost-effective. And there might be even, they have this thing in Australia where you have these deconstructed avocado on toast, where they give you the toast, they give you the avocado, and they send you over the toaster and they make it yourself. You could use this, I think, to really provide the customer with an experience whilst they're making their own coffee. And I don't think there's too many parts that could go wrong that they could risk breaking it. So it would be something interesting, and maybe I'll do that in a later video where I'll test it with my customers and see how many people would be interested in just walking up, using my coffee, popping it in there and pressing play and just watching it, because it really is an experience. And I think people would pay to just have that go, even if it's not something they do every day. It might be something that you could consider in small cafes, especially where you don't have the availability to dedicate someone to making a pour over. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Xbloom Studio. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if they're similar to mine, or if there's anything that I missed or didn't understand correctly, please let me know. Did this video tip you over the edge if you were on the fence about buying one of these? I'd love to know. I'm Ride, your coffee coach, and as always, enjoy your brew.